Hey guys, we are on screen, off screen, back for another episode. I am really excited about this one. We just finished filming our other one. Let's start with my first topic. I went and watched a movie called Better Man yesterday, and it is a movie about Robbie Williams. He was a boy band singer, and then he broke off and started doing his own thing. I liked his music when I was a kid, but I hadn't listened to him in a really long time. He is somebody who's dealt with depression his entire life, and he always saw himself on the outside looking in. So he saw himself as kind of a monkey, different from everybody else. So in the movie, they did motion capture like they did for the Planet of the Apes movies and made him a monkey and allowed him to be able to play himself, which I thought was kind of cool. And the screen capture for the monkey, for the character, is phenomenal. It's better than Planet of the Apes. It's really, really impressive, especially when he's younger. When he's a child and they're having him be a child monkey and he's kind of abandoned by everybody else and looked down upon, it's remarkable. Really, really, really good. But this movie, one, has a lot of really good musical moments where you feel like you're watching what is that show called? It won an Oscar. It was a musical, early 2000s. Very, very beautiful movie. You actually liked it a lot. With Obi-Wan Kenobi. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Ian McGregor. It the one I talked about last time?
No.
Oh, Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor. Do you know which one I'm talking about? I swear you like this movie. Moulin Rouge, yes. Do you like Moulin Rouge, right?
I do like Moulin Rouge.
Yeah. It felt like Moulin Rouge where you have these set pieces that are absolutely just gorgeous along with the dancing. And they did a really good job of shifting your perspective. So you're going through the main character's point of view, and he's dealing with a lot of depression. So he sees versions of himself throughout his life that are telling him that he's a loser, that we're coming for you, that you should just end it, that you are a complete waste of time. And you see him up on stage, and people in the crowd are chanting this at him. There's a part in the movie in particular where he... spoiler, I mean, this is his real life, but spoiler, he gets kicked out of his boy band that he's in when he's really young. He starts at 15 years old and he leaves at 19 or 20. He gets kicked out of the boy band and he's kind of just screwing up his life. He's on all sorts of drugs. He's on alcohol. And they have him singing a song as he's driving down the road. And you can see the rain hitting the windshield, and you think that he's going to hit a bus, and then he swerves, and then he ends up hitting another car. And it in the imagery, it breaks through some ice in the water, and the car is all of a sudden it's getting flooded, and it's drowning, and he's drowning, and he's trying to swim out of the car, swim out of the ice, but he can't get out of the ice. And you have all of these images of people, of shadows, of the voices that have been following him his entire life that are trying to pull him down before he wakes up. And you have these images over and over and over again until they become so much that all he can do is go to a hospital, actually get the help that he needs, and find some kind of peace in his own mind. The part of the movie that was most interesting to me was this aspect of depression and how they showed it visually. It was very impressive with the way that they were able to convey that. The other thing that I really enjoyed is that nothing about this movie felt like it was spoon-fed to you. They did a good job of showing and not telling. So you had to pay attention and follow along. But if you did, every part of it was more rewarding. You have a song where they're dancing on a boat, and it's a girl that he fell in love with. And they tell the story of most of this relationship with cutscenes in this one song. And they don't speak any words for what this relationship is. You just get to follow along with it. And the dances that are cut in between progress the story along. It's a very, very impressive whole set piece that they did there. Um, it was something that really got me thinking about dealing with those negative voices in your head versus just ignoring them. Because I ignore those all the time. All the time. And he just kept ignoring them and pushing it along further and further and further and further and further until he snaps. How long can you push that along? How long can you just keep ignoring those dark voices that pull you back into the water, that keep you underneath the ice? It's not a perfect movie, but it's a very good movie, and I would probably give it a solid 8. I really, really liked it.
So my first question about this movie is,
Yeah.
what motivated you to even go see it in the first place?
One, because I did like Robbie Williams' music as a kid, and I honestly didn't even realize he was the person that I liked. I had there's a reviewer that I like who reviewed the movie, said it was really good, and I said, "Huh, interesting. I'll check out this guy's music." And I remembered this song, and I knew this song, and I knew this song, and I knew this song, and I loved a song called "Miracle" as a kid. I loved this song. I thought it was great. I haven't thought about it in a really long time. So, one, I like the music. Two, I have a reviewer that says it's actually really good. Three, I love monkeys. Sue me. I've always enjoyed monkeys. If you put monkeys in something, I will probably like it more because it has monkeys. That's kind of a side point, but it's true. And then lastly, I read some reviews that said that the movie was beautiful, and I like beautiful things.
Okay, fair enough. I saw ads for this and did not know what to make of it. I thought they were referencing Robin Williams, and it was a very sick joke. That's what I thought it was.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yep. Because the ads just talk about him being on stage, and his name is Robbie Williams instead of Robin Williams. And then he's a monkey. And I was like, this is some very sick and twisted joke that somebody's put out there. I didn't even think this was a real movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
I mean,
I wouldn't have thought that.
that's just because like I knew nothing about the movie and I did zero research on it. Like I honestly didn't know. Don't take that as credit for what the movie was. I'm taking that as like this was my perspective after seeing an ad. So, you know, it's interesting to hear that it's got that quality to it. It sounds like it would be a very, 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 very difficult one for me to watch.
I agree. Actually, I do.
Yeah.
They do a good job. They do a very good job with the voices in your head. I don't know if it's my favorite biopic. I really liked the Elvis one, even though I don't really like Elvis music. I enjoyed that movie a lot. But this is up there with that one. I thought it was excellent. They just did a really good job with it. The thing I don't like about this one is it feels like sometimes it's unnecessarily crude. And maybe that's part of the way that he was raised, and that's really authentic to his environment and British culture, and I just don't know that. But sometimes it felt like they were pushing that for dramatization versus being real to the character. That might not be the case because this is one of the few times with a biopic where the artist was actually involved and voiced himself. You don't see that very often.
Have you
I don't
done
know.
any follow up to see the accuracy?
The story is supposed to be pretty accurate. I don't know how accurate the crudeness is. I don't know.
Okay.
But at the same time, there was a crude joke in the movie that literally made me snort. I don't snort in anything. I didn't expect this joke. I like choked in my throat because I was laughing so hard, and Sydney was looking at me like I was a psycho. But it hit me. I thought it was really funny.
Okay. I will not commit to watching it, but I will commit to thinking about watching it.
That's fair enough. it's not one that would have you process through depression necessarily. It's one that could have you think about it in a different way, if that makes sense.
It sounds like a very difficult one for me to personally watch. I'm not a big biopic kind of person. I did really like the Bohemian Rhapsody.
That one is good too.
I didn't really like the other ones that I saw. I haven't seen the Elvis one, but I watched two of them back to back. I watched Bohemian, then I watched a different one. I don't even remember what the other one was, but
Rocket Man, probably.
probably.
That's what
Um,
most people end up watching.
yeah. But yeah.
Cool, cool. Yeah, guys, if you give it a try, it's worth watching.
Okay.
All right, man. What is your next topic?
I switched mine around. We're going
Okay.
based on a true story with this episode. I'm going with my based on a true story that I watched. It's American Made, starring Tom Cruise. Have you
Okay.
seen this one?
No.
Okay. Uh, this one TikTok sold me on. I
Okay.
saw a couple of scenes and was curious about it, so I decided to look it up and see what was going on. Found out it was based on a true story. History buff me was like, heck yeah. So I decided to watch it and watched it a few days later. Uh,
Okay.
Tom Cruise plays a pilot who is recruited by the CIA to take footage over the Congo during the Cold War. And there's like a rebellion or civil war going on that the CIA is interested in getting pictures of. So he flies over and gets pictures. When
Okay.
he lands on the other side, he gets recruited by a drug lord to smuggle drugs back into America.
Interesting.
So he flies over, takes the pictures for the CIA, flies back, and while he's flying back, he drops drugs into Louisiana. Um,
Hmm.
and he gets really successful at this. Um, the money that he made kind of disappeared and vanished. So we don't really know how much it made, but low estimate in the like 2 years that he was doing this was like 15 million,
Okay.
and the high estimate is 5 billion.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So he was doing this. He recruited, he had like 6 other pilots join in. So he was just cranking them out, cranking them out, cranking them out, doing this. Um, so that's the basic true story that is told. In
Interesting.
reality, there's a lot of liberties that are taken in this movie from history itself. I just watched a video by the cynical historian, and he talks about it. It's a really good video. He goes a little too far, I think, by being a little too cynical, and then called it bad art. And I was
Okay.
like, that's just not true because the movie was enjoyable. His big criticism is that in the movie version, Tom Cruise's character gets outed by the president, and so the cartel finds out that he's a narc, and so the cartel goes and kills him.
Okay.
But in reality, it was New Yorker magazine, I think, that published a story on it, and then the president did it and then the president posted images of the cartel,
Okay.
and it's like, okay, I don't really care that they say that the anyway. Um, I think it does exactly what these kind of movies are supposed to do, and it makes sure the high points are accurate, and you can take certain liberties.
And
So
then you can enjoy it.
yeah, so in the movie, Tom Cruise's character quits his job as a commercial airline pilot. In reality, he was fired because he was doing too many stupid things for an adrenaline rush.
Okay.
Don't really care. In reality, the guy that Tom Cruise played is a larger, fatter, less attractive person. But I'll
Okay.
tell you what, if I was selling the rights to my movie, I'd want Tom Cruise to play me too. So I don't take one bad thing about that at all. And who cares? It doesn't play a role in the movie.
No, it
He's a
doesn't.
fat guy. So what? His thing is he's a pilot. And so Tom Cruise flying a plane, always good. This one, he's a CIA guy, then he's a drug lord, then the CIA decides to let him do his drugging thing so that they can keep working for him, and it builds his way up. Uh, very, very enjoyable movie. I really, really liked this one.
Okay.
It's not like the greatest historical movie of all time, um, but I did a pretty good job, and it was very enjoyable. It was a good watch. I'm very happy that I watched this one, even though the reviewer that I watched said that it was a waste of your time. I disagree. You can take liberties when you're talking about historical things. Not everything needs to be 100% accurate. Another thing he says is that, like, they should have just shown the true story and that would have been enjoyable enough. I think that's true. This guy had an interesting life. This guy, in a very short time, became a billionaire and then was killed by a cartel. That's a pretty exciting little few years that this guy had. But I'm not upset that the makers of the movie decided to say, "Hey, we can take some liberties and change some things and make it a little bit more enjoyable for the average viewer because not everybody's as into history as other people are."
That's true.
So,
Sometimes you just have to make things enjoyable.
yeah. And like I said, he said that his normal life would have been enjoyable enough. I think that's true. Like, I would still watch a movie about this guy,
So would I.
but I also don't think you would have cast Tom Cruise as the main role. So,
You gotta take
oh
what you
well.
gotta take.
You gotta take what you gotta take. I'm grateful I got to learn about this guy's life at all. That's that's my review. Even if this movie is pure baloney, because I watched this movie, I got to learn about this guy. He is still to this day regarded as one of the most successful drug traffickers of all time.
That's really interesting. That's really cool. I like movies like that make you want to learn a little bit more. And even if it is crap, you get to learn a little bit more, and that's awesome.
Yeah. I love
That's pretty
learning about
cool.
history. I
Me
love that
too.
I got to watch and learn more about this guy's life. Um, the one thing I'm not a big fan of is they made this whole thing where, like in Chernobyl, how the guy's like filming himself and recording
Mhm.
himself to his confession. They did the same thing in this movie, but there's zero evidence that the guy actually did it. And the way they explain it is like the
Oh,
CIA took the tapes when he was killed, when they found him killed, out of the trunk of his car. And it's like, I mean, yeah, you have plausible deniability. Yeah, the CIA took the tapes. But like, by the time this movie came out, wouldn't they have released the tapes because everybody knew his story already anyway?
for sure. Absolutely. Unless he was spilling some kind of secrets. But I don't know
I
why he would do
don't
that.
know. Yeah, I don't know either. But it was very enjoyable. It was interesting. It was good. Tom Cruise is really the only character worth caring about because literally everybody else is kind of just like in the movie to fill a role. The next biggest role is the CIA guy, and you kind of hate him. Um, but it does feature three different U.S. presidents. So,
That's cool.
yeah.
Like actual real presidents or
No,
just
actors playing the presidents.
okay, okay,
So they
okay,
have uh, Clinton as governor in the movie.
okay.
They have President Roosevelt, who outed him as not Roosevelt, whoever it was, um, outed him as being the drug trafficker. So they show a scene with him, and He's doing his drug thing. Nixon. It was Nixon.
Okay.
And they have young H.W. Bush Jr. And he's just visiting the White House when he was doing his military stuff. He was at the White House for whatever reason. And they have Tom
That's really
Cruise sit next
interesting.
to him. And it's just a stupid thing to be like, hey, that guy's supposed to be the president. Like, it doesn't matter to the movie at all, but it's just kind of funny.
Did they do anything to make him look like the good guy, even though he's doing something pretty evil?
I mean, I think they did a good job of balancing it because
Okay,
he's this
cool.
adrenaline junkie. He's this tool bag of a person. Uh, he really doesn't care about a lot of other people, but at the same time, he shows that he really cares about his family a lot. And I think that that's a fair kind of thing to have, right? Like, you can have a drug trafficker who's only doing it for the money. He isn't into drugs himself. And an adrenaline junkie who cares about, like, that's a totally plausible, like, yeah, he's
It's
greedy
a
and
real
he's kind of a
person.
douche, and he's like, oh, this is an opportunity, take it. Oh, this is an opportunity, take it. When he probably should say no sometimes.
Make the money and then not really worry about the harmful side effects. Just focus on getting the job done
Yeah.
and the enjoyment of doing the job, I guess.
Yeah. So he's not necessarily a bad guy because he is just kind of greedy and just trying to get through life, but he's trying to do it through a thrill, which is a little. Anyway, it's a balance, and I think the movie does a good job of saying this is kind of just a guy. He's not necessarily a good guy or a bad guy.
He's just a
He
guy.
has bad guys say, "Oh, I have an opportunity for you," and him say, "Well, okay, how much does this pay?"
And then him going, "Oh, that's a lot of money. Yeah, let's do
That
that."
is a lot of money. There's a scene where they're like, "Oh, we'll give you like 5 grand per kilo," and he goes, "Oh, how much is a kilo?" And then they end up putting like 20 kilo or whatever, like he's like carrying $250,000 of drugs each way, and it's like, yeah, drugs make a lot of money.
It's
They
a
for
lot of
sure do
money.
that. Yeah. So yeah, I would give this one probably an 8 out of 10. I
Okay, that's
really
solid.
wouldn't mind coming back to this movie. It was very, very, very enjoyable. Like I said, Tom Cruise in a plane. What more can you ask for? What more can you possibly ask for?
I added it to my watch list. I'm interested in watching that one for sure.
It's a good one. I very much like it.
All right, man. My next one was very interesting to me. It's called American Primeval. Have you seen anything on this?
Don't even know what it is. Never heard of it.
Okay. Have you heard of the Mountain Meadow Massacre?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but I can't tell you anything about it.
Okay. Very big thing in the history of the church that a lot of anti people
Oh,
will use, and Netflix made a show about it. The show is insanely well produced, like really, really good. They actually skinned animals to have authentic skins. The photography of the show is wonderful. The sound design is really great. And I think there's a lot of LDS people who are going to absolutely hate this show. One of the problems that we have with this event, so basically, outside of in Mountain Meadow, outside of Cedar City, there was a group of travelers that were coming through. And at that time, the LDS people had just been run out of every home that they've ever had, and they finally have a home of their own. Joseph Smith, who was the prophet at the time, had recently died. And Brigham Young, there was a time where I thought the LDS church was completely full of crap, didn't believe it at all. And one of my big problems was Brigham Young, in a lot of ways still is. He sees the prophet get killed, and he becomes kind of a militaristic, a bit of a douchebag. Brigham Young University, I would not name my university after this guy in particular, because a lot of the problems that you see with bad institutions, he displays. But I think that they push it a little too hard in this because they don't display it properly. Brigham Young became a militaristic control freak, in my opinion, because he didn't want his people to get hurt anymore, and he was going to stop the pain no matter what. In this one, he becomes kind of a evangelical psychopath, and that's not what I read with Brigham Young. One of the problems with the events of the Mountain Meadow Massacre is the fact that we don't have a lot of information because the church absolutely covered this up. For sure, without a doubt. And Brigham Young was part of that cover-up. So you can read it off as the way that Netflix describes this series of events because there's not enough information to be able to really clarify it. I think that they made the church leaders look too evangelical and crazy and didn't actually show how brutal the situation really was. So you have a stake president and you have a member of the church, and they're really worried about this group that's coming through. They hear that the military is coming to establish their own governor in Utah, and they're worried that they're going to be chased out again. Part of LDS history would say that they had connected this group of people with the military that was coming through. Non-LDS anti-history would say that this group they knew was just women and children and basic civilians, and they murdered them in just complete cold blood. I think it's a mix of the two, and I think you have a couple bad workers that don't that become they over exaggerate and overact. So in the show, they don't actually show this, but in real life, from accounts during the time period, the group of people were starving. They had run out of food, and the Mormons say, if you hand us your weapons, we'll guide you the rest of the way through Indian territory so you're not attacked anymore. The Mormons at that period of time had been staging small attacks and making it look like it was the Indians so it wouldn't be traced back to them, and then the military that was coming wouldn't attack them and shut down this area. They take the weapons, they're guiding the people through, and then they just absolutely kill everybody and leave no traces. The military eventually figures out what's going on, and Brigham Young does everything he can to cover it up. By church doctrine, there's a lot of, this was really wrong, but it was just a few people that were doing their own thing. Brigham Young didn't know, the church leadership didn't know, that kind of thing. If you look at the anti, then the church membership knew Brigham Young was inciting violence because of all of his rhetoric about we will defend our homes with the sword and the stone. We will defend them. We will gird our loins with the armor of God, and they shall not come upon us. That kind of thing. And so he was inciting this violence, and it's on his head anyway because he's the governor, he's the prophet, he should have known better. When I look at it, he's a man who may be ordained of God, but he's also a man that can make mistakes, and he was being too evangelical. He was being too smite the enemy, but he didn't know anything about these events from the letters that we have. And you take a group of people that's scared because they just got kicked out of their home and are scared again, and so they do something horrible and realize they did something horrible after the event happens. Let's go back to the show. The show doesn't show the group of people giving up their guns and just getting massacred. They just show the Mormons shooting arrows into the night and killing all of these people while they were sleeping. It's actually a little bit more justified for the for the LDS side of things. It's a little bit kinder to that side. But at the same time, you have Brigham Young that is shown as kind of a psychopath and really more of an antagonist than I think he was. I think he was just somebody trying to protect himself. A very interesting show, extremely well produced, very well acted. Sound design is really good. And it's interesting enough that even if you're a diehard LDS person, you probably won't agree with everything, but it's interesting to learn about and interesting to dig into more. I think that's what I would say.
So how would you rate this one on a scale of 1 to 10?
I have a really, really, really hard time with that because I do think that they depicted Brigham Young incorrectly, and that's going to sour a lot of people towards the church in a way that I don't really think is helpful. A lot of people don't understand Brigham Young's problems and don't actually have it right. And this is going to have people think in a way that I don't think is correct, even though he had major issues. But the show is also extremely well done. If you're willing, 7. I don't know. As far as production quality, it's an 8 or a 9. Very, very well produced. As far as little problems that I have with the way they portray some of these historical nuances that are not fleshed out enough in this show, 7, 6. Somewhere in the middle there.
So it sounds to me like with Brigham Young specifically, you say he was not a good guy, and you're just not happy with how they portrayed him as not a good guy.
He was a guy with a lot of problems, like a lot of problems that LDS people do not realize that he had the problems. The closest thing that I can think of in LDS history to somebody who is a cult leader type is Brigham Young. That's why I had the problem with him. But to understand his character, I think, takes a lot of nuance that a show that's 6 hours long just can't do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Like, what problems are you talking about? Try and help me understand that a little bit more.
So Joseph Smith gets killed. He kind of loses it and decides that he's going to be sort of a dictator. A lot of people accuse Joseph Smith of taking a lot of wives and just being kind of a scummy guy, where you're the typical cult leader mindset. But if you look at the history, the idea that Joseph Smith actually slept with any of these wives is highly suspect. He has 3 children that we know of. There's been a lot of anti-Mormons that have looked into this a lot. I don't see he's a bad guy that a lot of people who are against the church put forth to him. Brigham Young has a shitload of children, and there's even churches that were developed for men whose wives were stolen from Brigham Young. It is very much the typical, when people give crap to the Mormons, it is that kind of typical thing. He also does the law of consecration, which in the church is doctrine, but he takes it as communism. He meets with Karl Marx during this time period, and he actually includes communism inside of the church and becomes what you think of when you think of a communist leader. So he has this militaristic nature. He doesn't want anybody coming in and taking his governorship. He is the leader of Utah. He is creating these military groups and putting them together. He is talking about preaching, we will stop them with the sword, that kind of thing. But he's also a leader that, if you leave him alone, tries to be very kind to his people. He demands what he wants and he gets what he wants, but he's very, very kind to his own people. He looks after his own people. At least he tries to. I believe when he was meeting with Karl Marx and the communist crap that he included in the church, that he was trying to look after his people and thought it was a good idea at the time. he just became an absolutely domineering kind of person. Not a psychopath, a controlling dictator. Does that make more sense?
It does. So what about the movie is different? Are you saying the movie calls him a psychopath?
The movie, the way that the actor displays him, feels like he is a crazy person. It feels like Jonah, whatever his name is, the guy who was the evangelist in Mexico, where 2,000 people all committed suicide at the same time. It feels like he's portraying that guy, not portraying somebody who is more of a, I don't even know what you would call it. I want to say Stalin, because Stalin was obviously a psychopath and murdered everybody that he possibly could. Brigham Young was more of somebody, you stay out of my land, you leave me alone, and I will leave you alone, and I will guide my people because I am dictated of God kind of a person. And do you kind of understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to explain it the best that I can.
No, that definitely makes sense.
Okay.
Would you call this anti-Mormon then?
No, I wouldn't. Like I said, the way that they display the actual killings is less brutal than it probably was in real life. They gave us that. I call it. It isn't like they lied to make things look worse. They just took events as they were possibly unfolding and did the worst light on them. So you have these certain facts about this scenario, and you can take it in a worse way or a better way, and they both fit into what we know about history. They took it in the worst way. Not necessarily anti-Mormon, we're just going to completely blow things out of proportion, but not in a medium light, not in a positive light, in the more negative light that it could have occurred. Does that sort of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. It was an interesting show.
Yeah. I mean, last week I talked about I watched Heretic. I'm kind of surprised it's not on your list this week, but it sounds like a very similar thing, but Heretic is probably a little bit more positive than negative. But very interesting.
Probably.
Would you recommend people watch this movie? Show?
It's a TV show, and yes, I would. I would recommend you do more research after it. There's actually, can we add a link, Josh?
Yeah.
I will send you a link for one it's 10 minutes long, and it gives more of an LDS perspective on the events while still being honest with the fact that it's a really bad thing that happened. Like, it wasn't good. More grounded. That's a good way of putting it. We'll add that link to the. We'll add that link.
Description.
That's the word I was looking for. We'll add that link to the description, and you guys can watch it. There's a longer version, an hour and a half one that's also very interesting that I watched this week, trying to dig into this. It's more of a nuanced topic than I think they could have given in 6 hours.
Okay. Should they have made the show longer, or do you think they did what they were trying to do, and now we as historically interested parties should do the digging ourselves?
I think it would have been so interesting if they added a extra episode, kind of like they're doing with podcasts for shows like this, where they talk about each episode. But you had one episode where you have an LDS historian and maybe even an anti-Mormon historian, and they just argue back and forth. Something like that would have been so interesting.
You hear that, Joe Rogan? Get your next. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it would be awesome. It would be really cool. But something like that would have been great. Since they didn't do a podcast to add on to it, just do a little bit of research after and come to your own conclusion. It is an event that definitely was bad. Like, it was not a good thing. But there's more to it than the show is able to demonstrate. And I think if they would have been able to demonstrate all of it, it would have required too much. Because you really have to get into like Joseph Smith dying. You have to get into why they were kicked out of all of these different places they were kicked out of. And even I watched, I grew up LDS. I watched a lot of this kind of stuff. And even the shows, the massive amount of content that's out there doesn't really fully bring history together on why an event like this would transpire in a way you understand without getting into actual textbooks and pretty deep conversations. Because you're dealing with Joseph Smith trying to become president, him going into a land and flooding it with so many members that he can change the governmental structure of the land that he's going into, and why people wouldn't like that. You're dealing with all of this history that this show just doesn't have the ability to get into.
Okay. It's interesting enough. I am gonna watch this one.
Cool.
I'm very interested. It's always interesting to me, no longer LDS, but to see those kind of takes on Mormons. You know, I really don't like the anti-Mormon hate just to hate kind of garbage, but it's always interesting to see how Mormons are portrayed in media. So I think I'm gonna look this one up and check it out.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you'll think about it, especially coming from not being LDS anymore situation.
Yeah. All right,
All right,
let's
man.
wrap this one up. This was our, I guess, based on a true story episode. Uh, thank you, anybody, for listening once again. Please join us for our next episode.